All right, welcome to another episode of Poncha Talk. My name is Ellie. I'm host of Poncha Talk, and in this podcast we talk about all things related to remote work, digital nomad, and how to build a flexible lifestyle for yourself and pursuing your passions and dreams in your life. And today I'm excited to be here for another guest episode with Paul, who has joined me in this wonderful studio today here in Funchal, Madeira, to tell us about his story of how he started his own international video production company, Storytailors, is that right? And now he's operating all over the world and still has time to enjoy the Madeira sun in the meantime. So welcome to the podcast and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me, Ellie. And I bet you didn't think a chat around the island would end up to this. I didn't think either, but here we are. I'm leaving tomorrow, and I appreciate you took, 1 or 2 hours from your time to be here with Miguel in the Cathedral Studio in Bucharest for this podcast.
It's really nice that you organized the whole setup with us today so that I can see what video production really is about.
I appreciate it, and I really love this place and the city and the whole island, as you know.
Nice. Yeah. So maybe you just start introducing yourself briefly about what you do at the moment.
Well, I'm Paul Lungu. I'm a Romanian guy who's gone on a very long trip around the world in Romania. Most of the times I'm based in Bucharest, and what I do for a living is I work for a company which I also run and manage. It's called Storytailors, and we do production around the world. So we work for clients who have a certain creative brief. For example, it could be a TV station in London, and when they want to film abroad, for example, in South Korea or Bolivia or Madeira or Egypt, we come with the locals. So we have people in about 150 countries, and we execute shoots for our clients. As a team, I would say we're not huge in terms of numbers, but I think we are world class in terms of energy and dedication. We're about 30 people permanent and about 200 contractors with whom we work on a regular basis worldwide. So we basically organize shoots around the world in brief. That's what we do.
That's really cool. 150 countries. We just talked about it before. That's pretty much almost all the countries in the world.
Yes, that's pretty much everywhere. In fact, we were talking about this earlier that, there are places that we don't cover, like North Korea. But I bet that if we wanted to do something there, we could at least be able to ask a question. Obviously, it's not something we want to deal with, but if needed, usually someone in our network would know someone who could at least guide us in a certain direction. And in the past year or so, there were discussions even about places that, are a bit less predictable for foreigners, such as Afghanistan, Syria, various parts of the world where things sadly have not gone according to plan in the past few years. And I'm happy to know that, we can provide some sort of support in those places also, but it's not our main focus. Our main focus is usually places where people tend to go to film, either beautiful areas in Southeast Asia or places that are very relevant for documentaries, or places where, commercials are being made. Anything from the mountainous areas of your country to, less, off the beaten path kind of locations. Even Madeira was one of them last year. So there you go.
That's very cool. So now you operate all over the world, but how did it start? You started the company in Romania, in Bucharest?
Well, more or less. So I started working in production as a fixer in 2013. A fixer is the person who helps you when you film abroad. So basically, if you wanted to do your podcast in, let's say, a place you don't know, like Saudi Arabia, let's imagine, you would have someone to book you a studio, find you a guest, maybe organize things for you, translate if needed when you talk to various people, things like that. So that would be a fixer, right? So I started working as a fixer 12 years ago. I did a bunch of gigs in my home country of Romania for the Times, the New York Times, etc. And the interesting part of being a fixer is that you go, where people don't really imagine you can go, where you should go. You go to remote communities, you meet politicians, you meet super funky artists, you meet people who are obviously insane, but they're very public. You meet people who are incredibly nice and seem arrogant on television. You set up locations, you meet sports people and stuff like that. And so what I learned as a fixer is that there's nothing you should say no to. Your duty is to try, right, in production. And then the way I started it is I got a job in London in 2016, so I have to kind of put fixing on hold. But I always wanted this idea of a company. So I started, still keeping a Romania presence when I was in London. And from that point on, I added a few countries to the network. And so when in my last year in London, I registered the company there. So we're a British company.
Okay.
And then I started kind of growing it, adding countries. I'm lucky to have been able to put together a very, very good team close by. And so, 7-8 years later, here we are.
Nice. Has that experience of starting as a fixer hands-on helped you a lot with growing the companies? Like, did you make the connections at that time already to then establish the business?
Yeah. What helped in being a fixer is that basically in the company, I've pretty much done all the jobs. Anything from being the person on the ground to doing marketing, to doing legal stuff, payments, hiring, firing, clients, etc. So yeah, that helped a lot because I started from ground up. So it helps me to know the ins and outs. However, my experience in production is quite limited. So I'm not a great producer. I'm not a guy who's done, 10 films and 25 live broadcast TV shows and so on. I have a very limited experience as a fixer in Romania. And this is why I try to gather alongside me people who have proper experience. So the people we now have in the team are extremely talented, very hardworking, and very experienced producers who have a passion for that. I mean, we have someone who's done 6 or 7 films in Latin America. Our head of production has filmed all around the Middle East. Some people speak French, some people speak Filipino, some people speak languages in Southeast Asia. We have someone in Nairobi, etc. So everyone is much better than me in production. So we're trying to kind of create a platform for them to be, what they're meant to be professionally.
Cool. Yeah, I imagine when you're operating in so many different countries, different cultures, it's quite difficult to find the right people for your team, is it?
Well, very few people would think about this, but hiring the right person is a matter of transparency. The way I do it is this. Whenever we have an open position, I never get to an interview without clarifying the basics. Are you able to work full time? Do you have the right background for us? Are you okay with the salary? I notice a lot of companies don't say the salary beforehand, right? And I find that an absolute time waste because you end up, reading the CV, doing a background check, going on a call, maybe having someone else in our team joining, only to figure out at the end that your budget is different to the expectation of that person, right? So what I do, and the big life hack for me in terms of hiring people is once we have a CV that we like, they go through an online form which walks them precisely through the job description. They're being told, this is how the job looks like. You will not have time to do side gigs. It's not like an easy remote let's do nothing kind of thing. It's a proper hands-on production job. This is your volume. This is how much we pay. And this is what we're proposing. And this is the potential. Yes or no. And if it's a no, no problem. But we don't want to waste each other's time. True. So indeed, finding people is difficult. But filtering them out is the actual secret in being transparent. In fact, I was talking to someone recently. And she's applying for one of our roles. And a part of the way we pay is bonuses. So as a producer, you actually get a cut of whatever you manage and you bring into the company. So I was talking to her about it. And obviously, the retainer part is not very big. But if you're good, you actually end up earning quite well. So I was explaining this to her with real numbers. And she was still a bit in doubt. And I said, if we're going to make you an offer, I don't mind if you refuse it. So if you don't believe that you can make it, and if you don't believe that you can reach the average of the team in terms of revenue, for me, it's absolutely fine, because for me, that is a filter. I am looking for risk takers. I took a risk to start this. I want to share that with other people. And in case it is successful, I want you to earn more than in the industry. And if you're not good enough, things are not going to go well financially, and probably at some point we're going to part ways. But that's how it should be. it's a filter. It's always a filter, and be very straightforward. And someone who refuses an employment offer or someone who leaves in the first week, for me is actually a gain, because we didn't lose too much time to talk about it and to try to persuade each other, etc.
True. I like that transparency. I think that's also a very important setting stone then moving forward if it does end up in employment, especially since you're not in day-to-day contact with everybody, obviously, since they're all over the world. I think it's, I guess, very important all the way to always communicate clearly and set expectations.
Yeah. Trust is an important thing in the. So we're on an island where a lot of people work remotely, and you're gonna hate me for saying this, but working fully remotely doesn't work. So there is something in human interaction in teams that are physically in an office that you cannot get through remote work. Being a remote team ourselves, we do a reunion in Bucharest, Romania, once a year. We've done it twice so far. And interestingly, although the team blends very well remotely, after people come to Romania and meet each other, first of all, they're very surprised about people's height. Like if you've met people on Zoom, everyone's like, "Oh, I thought you were taller. Oh, I thought you were shorter. Oh, I thought you were, No one's gonna say I thought you were skinnier, but
they will think it.
So when we do the reunion, a lot of people come to me and say they're having various aha moments. They either realize things about someone else, or they brainstorm ideas, or they go to they have a cigarette break and they come up with stuff that they could solve. Or the team in Bucharest that works together, sometimes I know someone left their pet with someone else while they were away, things like that. So there's something very magical about people working from the same place. Now, having said that, working just from the office doesn't work either. I personally go to the office every day, but it seems like I'm a very rare case. I even go to an office in Madeira, as you may know, because we go to the same co-work, right? So my conclusion is 100% remote work doesn't work. 100% office work doesn't work. What works is hybrid. Because this way you give a bit of balance between the brainstorming time when people actually get together and they think about other stuff in a different way. A. B. You give a platform for the people who are more like extroverts and they need to charge themselves with talking to others, and you make it a bit fun. On the other hand, with remote work, you give people freedom. I mean, they can be anywhere. They don't need to spend an hour to dress up, go to the office and back, especially in big cities. And thirdly, you can focus better because obviously there's not much distraction at home. And also, as far as I know, introverts work better without others around them because they don't like the interaction or it uses their social battery. So I think the best solution is hybrid. And I don't know if it's hybrid more like 50-50 work from home and office, or more like 70% to 30, but there has to be a mix. Full-time remote for me doesn't work.
I don't hate you for saying that, by the way, because I do agree. Like when I started a remote job once during COVID, and that at that time, it just because of it being the lockdown, actually for the first 6 months or so, I couldn't meet anybody in person. And it was really hard to establish a connection to the company. I always just felt like somebody sitting at home doing random numbers at the computer. And then when I finally got to meet somebody in person, I was very surprised about the height. But much taller than I expected.
Everyone says that.
Yeah. You don't really think about it. No, but it does help also to just build deeper connections, because then you grab a coffee, you chat about other things, because sometimes in the remote work, everything's very structured. Like you go to a meeting, you have an agenda, and then you click sign off as soon as everybody says thank you, bye. There's no chit chat in between, no getting to really know the person. So I agree that an in-person meeting, I think especially in the beginning of working together, is quite important. And I can imagine that especially for the type of work you do, which is more creative and hands-on, it's also very important because you want to have a cohesive image, I guess, also that you display to your clients and within the productions that you do.
Yeah, and it's what we do in the end is requires physical presence on set. So we film in various places, we carry stuff, we do makeup, we do things like that. So you have to be in a place. But on the other hand, when we do make the reunion and you have like 20 to 30 mostly extrovert people in the same office in an open space, and someone at some point brought some alcohol from Mexico and they put some music and they're like, woohoo! I was thinking,
You don't need that every day.
Maybe like a week per year is quite enough. A few aha moments. See you next year.
So you have the office in Bucharest. Do you also have other offices distributed throughout for the rest of the people?
Physical offices, no. But our core team of about 30 people is based all around the world. So anywhere from Mexico City and Bogota to Kuala Lumpur and Manila or Nairobi. So there's a bunch of people everywhere. We're a British company with one British staffer, one British permanent contractor. Okay. Everyone else is from everywhere. So, and the reason why we have a bigger team in Bucharest is because I happen to be based there. And so initially I hired people there. And also I work from a Cork I really love. It's called Impact Hub. And it's good vibes. Plus, I prefer to keep finance close and marketing close. So just to make sure things go according to plan. And then obviously anything related to production has to be relevant to the local countries or the local regions they cover. So you would not really want to hire, a German, a Romanian or Portuguese producer to manage Southeast Asia or Latin America. It wouldn't really work. You need someone who's culturally appropriate for that region.
Yeah, I was just thinking that because you're from Romania, your company is based in London, your employees are all over the world. Have you ever experienced some major culture clashes?
Oh, have work? I ever?
Or how many?
We do cultural clashes every day. Maybe what I'm going to say is a bit politically incorrect, but a lot of the stereotypes you imagine about, for example, the way various cultures negotiate are true. So it's going to be very different to talk money in, let's say, Africa or Southeast Asia by comparison to the US, let's say. What I noticed is that there is a certain culture of distrust in many places, and there are regions where people know that the market is predictable. They look at you, maybe they heard about you, they know you're from the same culture, and they think, okay, great, we signed a contract. I'm fine to go ahead, pay me a little deposit and I'll start working. And there are places where they want to make sure that you pay them, even if it's small amounts. And although they look and they see, we're a pretty solid company. We do over 400 projects a year, right? And we would owe someone, I don't know, $250 or something. They will make sure it gets paid up front. And if we're 1 hour late, they'll start calling us, right? Although obviously, if we're ever late, it's because our admin is a bit slow because we have a bunch of things to do, right? And we never end up owing money to people, right, unless they didn't deliver or there's an issue. But there is a culture of distrust in certain places. So that's one thing that can be slightly frustrating. The other thing that's also politically incorrect is that in many places you get the dumb foreigner premium, you get the gringo premium, right? So they imagine because you're a British company, you're a cash cow, right? Now the funny thing about it is that we're a British company with a Romanian owner, and the way I like to put it is when I receive huge unrealistic quotes or I hear about them, I say, in Romania, this is the kind of stuff they would kick me out from kindergarten with. So I've seen this so many times, so you cannot really bullshit us, right? Thirdly, I'll say something positive, also politically incorrect, but very positive. Some cultures are just so welcoming. And the most interesting example to me is the Japanese culture. So they work a lot. They work very hard. Quite inefficient from our experience. So there's a lot of, because they don't tend to like to improvise, they think of every detail, right? And so to us, sometimes it's a bit too much. And when they see our timesheet on how many hours they need to pay, they go oh, but why it's taking so long? Well, you guys are asking us, a lot of things. So hardworking, In my opinion, they could be more efficient. However, they are super respectful, and every time they come on set or they meet our people, they bring a little something from Japan or from the country where they come from. So I've been with my colleague Wana, who does the Japanese language service. We've met Japanese clients. They would always either take us out for lunch or they would give us a little gift or. And when we would give them a gift, it's not like in our culture and in our, European Western cultures where, I give you a gift, you say thank you, and then we start talking. They look at the gift, we talk about it. It needs to have a story. Maybe they email you about the gift later on. If it's, for example, a bottle of wine, they're going to have it with their family and things like that. So I really love that part of the so-called culture clash, which is really beautiful and interesting, and we end up learning about each other.
Nice. Yeah, it's very sincere. I only met one Japanese guy, I think, also while I was traveling. But he did bring some candy from home for everybody at the co-living and co-working where I was staying. And he shared that.
Right.
And we...
The culture of giving gifts in Japan is quite astonishing. Interestingly, sometimes when I speak to young Japanese people, they go like, "Oh yeah, gifts in Japan. My God, they're so fine." But I love that, because
give me the gift.
If you need to do that every 2 weeks, if you're it's probably tiring. But when you get that maybe twice in your lifetime, whenever you interact with Japanese people, you're like, "Wow, it's so great." But for them, some of them,
I guess, yeah, but for us, it's like, it's
special,
unusual.
Yes,
it leaves
yes.
an impression. It's nice, yeah.
Indeed, it's also the other thing I noticed is when you give a business card, you give it with both your hands. It's received with both hands. You look at the thing, okay, this is Ellie, podcast, okay, and I put it here. I don't just take it and put it in my back pocket and I start talking. So.
Much more sincere.
And a lot of chivalry and They had an interesting culture. It makes me want to discover Japan. I met a guy at the Estalage a while ago here in Madeira, and he was doing a little nomad thing in Japan. His name is Matt. So he was doing like a little nomad village operation there. So maybe it's going to pick up. Maybe we go to Japan at some point.
You should, yeah. So, I mean, you travel to Madeira. That's just your personal choice, right? That's not for production or anything here. But do you travel to different productions around the world as well?
Very rarely we go on production. I don't really go on set. I would love to, but if I do that, I need to neglect other duties, and so people will end up hating me if I do it. It's great fun to be on set, as you probably know. Madeira to me has become a second base. So it was during the pandemic times. I was in some other place, some other warm place, and I always wanted to get rid of the winter in Romania. So someone said, "Hey, did you hear that Portugal invented the digital nomad village of Poncha Talk?" So I started looking into it, and I saw this video of this guy called Gonçalo who started the digital nomad movement in Poncha Talk. So I kind of kept that on my mind. I returned to Bucharest, and I think in May 2021 I decided to come here, and I lived in Poncha Talk for a while. Then that whole summer, and a new territory opened for me, and I've been coming here since 2021, and I tend to spend about a quarter of my time. So on and off, I've been living in Madeira for about a year now, throughout the past 4 years.
Nice.
So and as you know, it's an interesting second base because, I mean, to you it's a base, but for me it's a second base, and it's interesting because you meet people you wouldn't normally meet. I think there's also a sort of threshold here. I mean, in order to come to Madeira, it's a bit of an effort. It's not very close to everything. You need to properly plan. Nowadays, it's not easy to find, a place to stay and things like that. So you have to be really determined to be here. So it attracts a certain type of people, a certain type of nomads. It's less the sort of flip-flop gig movement. And I feel it has more substance, more... more of an element of the unusual here. So every time I come here, I meet people I wouldn't normally meet. So I come up with new ideas. In fact, the idea of hiring people and scaling came to me when I was going up the hill in Poncha do Sol. And I can't remember what I was doing, but I was thinking about my company, Julie, and I was walking. And I thought I should scale. And, all my to-do list, I have to break it into pieces and kind of define what everyone would need to do if they were to join my company and try to scale so everyone has enough work. And this thing came to me while walking to Poncha do Sol. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think walking or hiking or anything like that is a great way to this is why I also love going on hikes and walks. It's just a good way to organize your thoughts. And random things pop up.
Yeah, for some reason, and when you tell it to people, especially in bigger cities in continental Europe, they think it's, oh, what a fuss. Oh, you need the ocean. Oh, you what is it with you? You don't like to be in your country anymore. But no, it just changes things somehow. And another thing I noticed on Madeira, I'm a total control freak. What I noticed here is that usually things come together as they should have. I remember I came once to Ponta do Sol, maybe like 2 winters ago or 3 winters ago, and I booked this apartment, and it was right next to like the main street, and it was super noisy, and they were putting Christmas carols, and I was right next to a church, and the bells were ringing every 15 minutes. And I thought, oh my God. So I had to move from there the next day to this lady who had a house in the village who I knew, and she would do Airbnb. So I moved there. So when I got to Madeira, I was sitting there. It was super noisy. I'm a very light sleeper. I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? My mom was supposed to come in about 2 weeks. The apartment was too small. Fast forward, my goodbye party in Madeira was in this really nice villa, which I found for a really good price up in Taboa in Ribeira Brava, kind of up the hill, with all my friends there. And I had been living there for a month by that point, and it was great. So, but somehow things kind of, turned to be okay.
Nice.
So you need to trust the process, and trust me, I'm a control freak. So if I say this, there is something here. I don't know if you can feel this energy or not really.
Yeah. It's something about I don't know what it is. The way of life here, it's just like, I don't know. I've also found that for myself. Because, I don't know, I've had some setbacks recently too, but so many other things just pop out of it. And then the next day you meet somebody and like, oh, great, let's do it. And a collaboration comes out of it or whatever it may be. It's just, I think it's because there's so much like opportunity around you in Madeira at all times also. So it's nice.
I think you call it, is it effervescence? Is that a word in English? Like, there's a mix of a lot of elements that kind of blend together.
But let's go back to you walking up the stairs in Ponta do Sol and thinking of, oh, why don't I scale my business? How big was it at the time? And then how did you go about it?
So the pandemic was awful for us and for production in general. Whoever says, the pandemic was easy for them business-wise, I think they forgot it very quickly. So in the pandemic, I was pretty much the only full-time guy left in the company. We were still doing some shoots, and people started doing remote shoots, but it was quite tough. So 2020 was very bizarre, I would say. It was enough to keep us running, so I didn't have to shut down anything. It was, I'm also a pessimist, so I always have a backup cash for salaries and things like that. So that was okay. And in 2021, when the pandemic kind of started finishing, I remember I sent some pitches, some budgets that winter, right before Christmas, end of 2020. And then in 2021, we got some pretty good gigs, some pretty good productions. And that's in February 2021, I started hiring. So I hired Zaina, who's our head of production, and she's a brilliant woman. I call her the golden woman. And she's been with us ever since, started with us as a producer, working with me as an amateur sort of CEO kind of guy, kind of learning his thing. So in 2021, when I was here in Madeira, kind of walking the stairs, it was me, Zaina, and this other producer who had joined us. So it was the three of us kind of trying to do things. I was still doing a bit of everything, and I was kind of thinking, what's the size of opportunity, which is something I learned from my mentor in London. So I was kind of thinking, where do we want to go? And there's a mix between where you want to be, like what's your vision, and the practicalities of life, which I usually summarize in a spreadsheet.
Okay, yeah. You're very structured, reasonable. Conclusion
is, walk around Madeira, be good with spreadsheets, and you'll probably be finding something in your life.
But the vision at the time was then already to, why don't we do productions all over the world?
That was it, yeah, because initially I started with Romania and Moldova, then I added a few countries, and I noticed it kind of works. So from that point on, it was just the idea, how do we scale? How do we market the countries? How do we find the people? How do we give trust to the clients? How do we get insurance? How do we make payments worldwide? Things like that. So the moment when I had some brilliant producers alongside me who could actually take the clients and make something great out of them, I could start focusing on the system itself. So that was, the brilliant thing was that I found Zaina and people like her who are so good at what they do that I don't need to deal with the clients. And so from that point on, I can bring clients, I can find, things like that. I think one of the things I would kind of take out as a rule is scaling is not always the appropriate word, but I think the appropriate word is creating a system or creating a process, creating something that works for you that can be, seen as rather as a rule or a principle or a platform, as opposed to you doing A and B.
Okay, yeah. And then I guess once you have the processes in place, it'll scale itself, because otherwise it's just a mess.
Yeah, to some extent, but it's interesting because, a lot of people I hear around me talk about scale. Scale. And a really funny, very dear friend of mine was talking recently about another friend of ours who was doing pilmeni, which are these Russian, Eastern European dumplings, and they're very tasty, and she's doing that in Funchal for a bunch of people. And they met this guy, and they were talking about making pilmeni, and so they love making pilmeni because it's just beautiful and manual, and it's something traditional, and people enjoy it. So it's more like a passion project. And the guy was like, "How do you want to scale? How are you going to brand yourself? How are you going to market and things like that?" So, and I'm having the same conversations with my bestie, who's a brilliant marketer, and I was talking to her about where does she want to go with her business, how does she want to do things, and I'm thinking through my own kind of window, which is creating process, scaling, making as many productions as possible. But I noticed, for example, in marketing and online marketing, you don't actually want necessarily to scale as in having an agency, because the agency model is scalable to a certain point. It's not that easy to just bring volume and just do a lot of churn over time. It's not actually that much of an opportunity, but the opportunity you might have in marketing and in some other industries would be to create a persona around yourself, so to kind of bill more for your time, and B, to create some sort of IP, some sort of blueprint, so intellectual property. So anything from an ebook to a style of working to a platform of resources and stuff like that. And the other interesting way of scaling things, I'm sure you know Martin. He's very present in the nomad world in Madeira.
The one who runs the tech meetups?
Yes. So I had a very interesting conversation with Martin. He used to call himself at the time, and I think he's still calling himself a solopreneur, right? And so I profusely disagree with that idea, because I think you need organizations, you need to pay people in order to make big things. And I appreciate the fact that he disagrees with me on that note. So we had a very interesting conversation. And the way I asked him, how do you see scale? Because you need many hours, you need manpower. And his solution is building community, building, an app or a tech product, have it decentralized. And so if people participate, they'll get some sort of reward within that community, right? So it's super interesting to think, what is the definition of growth, actually?
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not always scale. Sometimes it's creating a rule, creating a process, going to the next level, or bringing some sort of difference for the people around you through whatever means you have around and whatever works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that Martin says he's a solopreneur, but then he needs a community around him to grow. So it's technically still goes back to having other people, huh?
Well, I think the difference between solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, one of the differences is how do they see hierarchy and what is the financial flow, right? Because I see it as you employ people and contractors. There's a financial flow from the center to the execution part, and we all work as a team. Whereas he would see it, I believe, as a community-led kind of organization that doesn't really have a leader and kind of leads itself in a decentralized way.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So for your company, you're already almost in every country of the world now producing. How do you plan to, or do you plan to grow in the future? How do you define it for yourself?
Well, interestingly, if I'm to compare where we are now with where we were in, let's say 2019 before the pandemic, I think the growth is something like 16 or 20x. So
Wow.
it's significant. But yeah, what's the what's the avenue for growth, right? Um, I think in 2025, growth will start changing in terms of definition because we have a lot of disruptors. So first of all, there's this world context in which everyone is going wacky, right? You got to be a bit over the top in the world to get noticed these days. And we all know what I'm talking about, right? And so the world is unstable. Anything from currencies to geopolitics to laws to, to political movements, very wacky. So that's the first thing you need to look into. Usually, in past years when people would budget for black swan events, so super unusual things that happen, black swan events would have a 2% chance of happening. Now, after one pandemic and several situations when we could have gone World War III, I think nowadays you need to plan first of all for black swan events. So first thing is the world is kind of wacky. Secondly, there's a lot of disruption in tech. It's not just AI, it's everywhere. So, the question is going to be, are we going to get replaced by AI sooner or later? I think for us in production, it's going to be probably later than people think, but it's still going to be in our lifetime, right? Thirdly, what is not going to change in 2025, 2026, and from that point on? What is not going to be replaced by robots? What is not going to be affected by the weird turn of events in the world, right? So these would be the elements on which I would look in general to think about growth this year and over the next few years. In our case specifically, we're trying a few things. So first of all, there's your organic growth in acquiring new clients, getting recurring clients, being better in marketing. So everything we do already. Secondly, we have a Japanese language service, which is evolving quite interestingly, and it's set on Japanese speaking clients. And for the first time, we have a proper team around it that's doing a really great job. All right. Thirdly, I'm trying to think if there's a way to expand towards kind of different pillars of the business. For example, we do a lot of production. However, our people who do production, producers in general, are very versatile. So you could get a producer to organize an event, or you could get them to help you set up a company in their country because they know a lot of people, they know how to talk, and they're very persuasive, right? So I'm always asking myself, where would I get to if I have one person I can trust in every country around the world, right? So that's the more, I would say, philosophical part of growth that I'm looking at. Okay. So this is kind of where we're looking at this stage. And then to leave you, to end this answer with more of a joke. In Romania, I'm not sure if you have the saying in your culture, but in Romania we say, plans are what I tell to God to make him laugh. So I try not to plan. I try to rather think of options, possibilities, and build day by day.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I guess especially with the world going wacky, any plan is just a guess at this time.
I guess the thing that we need to ask ourselves is what is not going to change, what is going to stay the same, and in our industries, for us it's news and sports, right, and live broadcast. So no matter how far AI will go, you're not going to have, bots playing football. Everyone's still going to want to see Cristiano Ronaldo scoring goals, right? If we can be paid to film that, then we're going to have a job, right? News will be the same. You're not going to have, AI producing news. You need reality, etc. And I think in every industry there's something related to that. So I try to look at that too quite a lot.
Yeah,
and really, there's a lot of things that will stay the same. Sadly for us as millennials, Gen Z, we're not very good with food, animals, construction. We're more like laptop kind of people. So who knows?
True. But that's a good tip to look at. Have you seen a big impact of AI over the last couple of years in your field?
So far, for us, no. There's some reluctancy in terms of use, first of all. Secondly, in terms of video generation, AI is not there yet. So when you see tools like Sora or others presenting a demo online, and you look at that and you think, wow, this was made with AI, incredible. And then when you try to achieve the same result by yourself as a user on the platform, there's a huge difference. So in the end, they're not there yet. They will be there. I foresee there will be a disruption for us either at the end of next year or within 2 to 5 years, I foresee disruption for us, and we're getting ready for that. To answer your question, so far, no. So far, actually, we've been growing year on year quite well. But I do think at some point, if we're going to want to make a commercial for a perfume, you're going to do a prompt and say, tall guy with dark hair on a beach in Thailand using my perfume and spraying it on his shirt, right? And it's going to be a prompt, and you're going to edit a little bit, and that's going to be the commercial for your perfume. You're not going to need us to fly you to Thailand, find the permits, secure the beach, bring the cameras and all that. We'll probably be obsolete in that moment, but it's still a while to go till that point.
I think
Luckily.
so too. Yeah, I was just talking to somebody earlier today, also for the podcast, because it's like we were talking about how it's a lot of time to spend on the interviews and all of that, and Louis said, "Oh, maybe just do an AI podcast, and just the AI based on what I've done so far can just do the interviews and stuff for me," which I guess it could, but I think it's still not the same. Also, I have tested some of the tools, and personally, I would say it's not ideal, and I think it just at the moment, because it's not well done, it takes away all of the personal touch also. I mean, I'm no Cristiano Ronaldo, but I think there's still a personal touch to a podcast that's important, and it is, after all, like creative work, and I think creative fields like this, like the podcast, like your video production, it can never be fully replaced, because you always need a person. Yeah.
The form of AI we see now is the worst we're going to see in our lifetimes. So let that sink in.
We still have some time. We can do a couple more episodes before AI takes over.
Yeah, let's see. It's going to be an interesting time in our lives, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. No, very cool. Thank you very much for sharing all of your journey. It's really cool how you grew your company to all over the world in just a couple of years, really. I really like what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. A lot of the journey for anyone, I think, is related to the people they have around them. So I was super lucky to have people around me who are supportive and very good at what they do. On one hand, if you want to do things, if you want to kind of lead the way or start things or manage, everybody wants a piece of you. So you need to start with the idea that you need to give more than you take, at least at the beginning. So, internally, people will want you to be more understanding, or sometimes harsher. They will want a salary raise, or sometimes they will think that we're spending too much money on something specific, or they'll want to come to the office, or they want to stay at home, and you're a bit annoying that you're making them come to the office. And then there's obviously the clients who want everything done yesterday for free if possible. So you need to start with that. That's just how the world works. Now, separately on this journey, I was lucky enough to find allies, to find people who were supportive and good at what they do. The other thing that worked for me and it was important in the journey was mental therapy. So I'm a guy who gets very stressed quite quickly. I have a very sort of, I could say Eastern European pattern of work where, the boss is the boss and they need to hit, the fist in the table because we come from the East, right? And so I had to learn, to be less like that and be firm when I have to be firm and be, human being when I have to be a human being, right? So therapy helped a lot. And then every year or every month, when I think, I'm actually becoming, remotely good at this, I do some kind of weird gaffe or something doesn't work or I upset someone or someone wants to quit because they took a very bad decision upon something where I misjudged it. And someone very dear to me in the team asked me recently in a certain situation, what is the limit between accepting this behavior or not accepting it in our company? And do you know what I said? I said, I don't know. Hardest thing to say when people expect you to know everything. And I guess that's the great thing and the annoying thing about being passionate about what you do, whether you're managing or whether you're a solopreneur or a freelancer or an entrepreneur or a doctor or a driver or whatever you are, you know, as long as you have passion, every day you're going to find something that challenges you, annoys you, or makes you happy. And if that happens, it means you're in the right place, right?
Yeah.
I think the worst thing is to be kind of linear and not to care. Even going down is sometimes you know, a step forward. As we say in Romania, you know, a kick in your ass is a step forward.
Yes. Doesn't feel like it at the moment, but you'll learn and you'll grow from it.
It's always a bit like that, yeah. The other thing is with social media, we see a lot of success, right? So if you look, for example, at social media, at, you know, things related to investments into company, into the stock exchange, you only see how much people won. You only see, oh, had you bought Palantir when it was $8, now you would have made a fortune. Okay, but you never see, you know, the people who bought companies that fell. You know, there are a lot of companies that fell. There's a lot of people who lost money in crypto. You know, you never see that. That's never put online. You know, you rarely see failure, and you know, you see the nice holiday and all that. So it's a very sort of manicured, made up kind of reality that we look at. And I try to learn more from failure. I try to listen to people who are genuine. And every time I hear of, you know, people who talk about a lot of money, big numbers, how they were successful, how they were achieving things, I'm a bit like, okay, thank you very much, but how do we protect ourselves from failure? You know, how does that work for you? You know, so I look a bit more at that, and I'm also very conscious that apart from the fact that social media reduces the attention span of people quite a lot, and I don't know if you notice, but very often you talk to people and they zone out after 10 seconds, right? And I'm sometimes thinking, am I uninteresting, or is it...
No, you just didn't have like the Instagram hook written on you, like big bold letters.
Exactly. So is that part where you always need a hook? And I'm like, I'm just a guy. Sometimes I'm uninteresting. I mean, if you don't want to talk to me, just fuck off, you know? Right? So there's that part. And there's also the part that, you know, you look at some statistics, and when you hear that, you know, among young males in America, you know, suicide is one of the highest reasons for death. You kind of go, oh, hang on, social media is actually a pretty dark kind of thing, you know. So you need to take it with a bit of a filter. So what I try to take from social media is rather failure, or things that didn't work, or things that people think aren't going to work, or things that people don't look at, rather than the whole, you know.
Yeah.
Here I am, you know, I'm a super cool coach. I'm going to help you make 7 figures out of 6. Contact me now, and it's only 5K. You know, I try to get away from that quite a lot.
Yeah, that's probably best. Better to surround yourself with the right people in real life that will support you through the ups and downs.
Yeah, that's one thing I liked about you, that you don't seem to have a script. You're you.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, if you want to listen to me, fine. If you don't, that's also fine. You don't come by as someone who's an extrovert, at least to me, because I talk a lot. You're more of a listener, and I like that. But you are a determined person and a daring person, so I appreciated that a lot about you. You know?
Thank you. Yeah, I am introverted, and I think, I mean, I don't talk a lot. The podcast is probably the most I talk whenever.
Right.
So, but yeah, I like it because I like to listen to people's stories, and this is the mission of the podcast also, is to just share stories. Even though we're pushing the attention span of the listeners today, we're way over the 20 seconds.
Yes.
No,
we're way over the 20 second. Yeah. If anyone will listen to this point, they're either our parents or
yes.
or they're interested in what we say. So.
Exactly. Very interesting hearing your story. I'm curious to see how it continues for you. I'm sure you'll be back on Madeira
Hopefully.
at one point. Hopefully, when the winter comes back next year at the latest.
Who knows? I'm flying to freezing Bucharest tomorrow, but it's a lovely place, and the way I like to tell it to people when they come to Bucharest, I tell them to come with very low expectations, which they do, and then they end up loving it. And I've got 1 or 2 people in our company who says, I've got 1 or 2 people in our company who said they're considering moving to Bucharest, and we were quite flattered because it's a city that grew a lot, and Romania itself is becoming quite prosperous nowadays. So
okay.
I'm happy to be there and have it as a base. It's quite a lovely place and very resourceful nowadays.
Maybe I'll have to go one day. I think I've only been to the airport for a layover once.
Yeah, come in the summer, anytime from May to September. It's a bit too hot in August, but
okay,
it's quite lovely when it's nice, light, and beautiful weather.
Good to know. Good to know. Yeah, I've heard there's some co-livings and nomad destinations around there too. So who knows?
To some extent, yeah, it's still, I would say Bucharest is still off the beaten path, but it's now kind of growing. And then Romania has a very special gift of rural life, traditional life. We're a country that still has in its forest, it has wolves, it has bears, it has lynx, it has wild goats. So if you go on a hike there, don't go alone.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're not selling me on the bears.
It's super likely to meet bears. In fact, you're going to see bears driving around in the mountains. They're going to come out on the edge of the road. And it's fine in general, but don't go feed them or don't go take selfies with them, as some people have tried in the past years. So it's got that. It's got real rural life. Like, you can still go and see people who live a very traditional way of life, who actually, grow their own vegetables. They have animals, at the same time, they are, civilized, respectful. They go to church, they work and things like that. And they choose to live in a more traditional way. So you have that on a very genuine level. And obviously you have the bigger cities. I would say Bucharest is more similar to probably Frankfurt than it is to a small village in Transylvania, because it's got the big city life.
Yeah.
But I always enjoy going to Transylvania or to central Romania, Brașov, or to the villages, where you still see shepherds, sitting on their smartphones next to the flock of sheep and, checking stuff on TikTok while I don't know, getting their dogs to run towards the village or something like that. So Romania is a mix of everything, and it's a place I love, and I enjoy being there most of the time.
Very cool. Yeah, I'll check it out sometime. For sure.
You're welcome to come. Just give me the heads up.
Amazing. Okay, great. Thank you so much. This was a really nice conversation. Thanks again for sharing.